Hey, everybody. Welcome. Thank you all for coming. I think this is going to be the coolest part of it. I was chair of the scholarship committee this year, and they told me when I went on as chair, this is the coolest committee, and it has been the most fun. We had so many student applicants, so if you applied, know that you were in fabulous company. Amazing work from all the students that applied for the scholarship, and so many congratulations to these people in the front row. If you have not been to see their exhibition yet, please go do so. It's at the UAB Art Lab. Is that correct? Did I say that correctly? I think so. UAB Art Lab, and it is just a phenomenal show. You will never, I just was telling them, I mean, it's a phenomenal show. If you were in the middle of New York City looking at the show, it would be a phenomenal show. But to know that it was all student work makes it even more so, more so. So congratulations again. I just want to thank our jurors for choosing these scholarship winners. Richard Zimmerman is an interdisciplinary artist whose work spans various media, including sculpture, photography, sound, video, and drawing. His work focuses on exploring the intersection of subjectivity and the built environment. He holds an MFA in studio art from Cornell University and a BFA in painting from Pratt Institute, and has received multiple awards and been in multiple exhibitions. And I'm not going to read all of those because there's probably not time to read all of those. Our other juror was Ruth Stanford. Ruth received an MFA from Carnegie Mellon University and a BFA from the University of Texas at Austin. She also holds a BS and MS degree in zoology and worked as an endangered species ecologist prior to beginning a career in art. Her practice revolves around installation and site-specific sculpture, and much of her work explores history and notions of presence, absence, permanence, impermanence, and fiction and reality. So thank you very much to both of our jurors for doing the hard work of going through all of those phenomenal applications and choosing our winners. So I'm going to leave now because nobody wants to hear from me. They want to hear from you. I'm going to let our students introduce themselves as they come up and tell us a little bit about themselves as they talk to us about their work. And I'm going to ask all Q&A to remain till the end of the presentation so that we can get through everybody. We have enough time to get through everybody. Then we'll ask all our emerging artists to come up here and we can bombard them with questions. So welcome, Misa.
Hello, everyone. I am Misa Yo. I am from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and I'm currently a senior. And I am born and raised in Taipei, Taiwan. And today I'll be talking about my work. Here. Ah, okay. So today for my presentation, I'll be mainly focusing on the works and the goals that I have for the upcoming works that I am making. This presentation is mainly organized by chronological order, and even though there's like some overlap in timeline, but I'll talk about that and regarding with like what are the works influenced by and what I'm excited about for the works yet to come. So this is the first sculptural installation that I made in college, and each piece are individually wheel thrown and then carved. Throughout the exhibition, there were people that came back to me and told me that how they felt when they were looking at the piece. And they also told me that sometimes after their work, they were staring at my work for like a few minutes and they felt like calm after the end of the day. And at that specific moment, I realized that that is when I feel completed with my work. And I started thinking more later on about how my work could be interactive without people actually physically touching it, and how I can create, how people can create their own specific memory to them. And I think it's such a beautiful thing that something that I made with my time and effort for so long, and people finding a place that they feel belonged in or connected to within my work. So I'll take a little break from installation work and I'll talk more about my sculptural pieces. So this one is a 3D printed ceramics on top of wheel thrown ceramic forms. And I experimented with printing on top of things that aren't on a flat surface so that even though it's a digital file, the results would come out unexpected. And I really enjoyed how like the one side of it is like really chaotic, and you could see from the middle area how the layers started to stack back up. Yes. And this one is also a 3D printed file, which is in the scholarship exhibition right now. Originally, I didn't add the copper wire to it, and it was just this piece of ceramics, but people mentioned that it looks like wires, or it looks like something that it looks like ceramics, but they didn't want to believe that it was ceramics. So I started thinking how lively it looks, and then I wanted to embellish them, so that's how I got the idea of wrapping copper wire around it. And this is what I've been working on recently with the same file, but instead of printing it with a 3D printer nozzle, I started printing it with piping bag nozzles. So I could change the pressure of it and also changing the extrusion speed so that it becomes more and more chaotic. So the file on these two are files that I barely changed for the digital file. And the one on the very right would be the one that was printed by a piping bag nozzle. And these are also pieces that I've been working on more recently. The two on the left and right is all 3D printed, and same as the ones before, experimenting with printing on top of a non-flat surface. Yeah, and the middle piece, I have to say that it's glass blown by one of my professors on a field trip, but I do also do glass blowing, and it was glass blown into a copper wire crocheted sculpture that I made. And now let's shift into my glass sculptures. Since glass and copper has a similar coefficient rate of expansion, I was able to include copper and bronze into like glass. And this one was like ladled on top of a copper crocheted piece. And this piece is glass casted. And I also crocheted copper wire into an open face mold. And then I put glass pellets inside and then casted it. And I really like playing with like modular forms of installation, since like the way you install it could really define how people see it. So when I installed it vertically, like the last picture, a lot of people read it as like corals or like sea life, stuff like that. And then when I installed it horizontally, a lot of people saw it more as like clouds and something that's more calming, which I find really interesting. And this is a neon installation that I started. I started collecting glass of neon tubings throughout the semester when people are throwing away like old projects. And since glass tubings, you can't really tell the color from the outside without pumping glass in. So I had no idea what the color is until we pumped glass into it. And it became a nice surprise during critique when everything turned out pretty. Um, yeah. So also in sophomore year, around the time when I started glass casting, I was introduced to the foundry and I started falling in love with like bronze casting and iron casting. So this is one of the first bronze installations that I did. And that year, since all my classes was in the foundry, and like glass bending and stuff like that, I was always in the basement. So people started calling me the studio rat. Yeah. These were all casted individually. The bowl shape were all casted individually, and it was made with wax coils. So you can actually see, I can see it from my picture, but on the picture on the very right, you can see my fingerprints since it's casted in ceramic shell. You can get all the details of the fingerprints. And when I patinaed it on the outside with liver of sulfur, you can really tell like the different textures that like every press that I did with the coils, it shows on the surface. And I love it when people started interacting with it and touching the exact fingerprints. Um, Here are some pictures of people interacting with it. And I don't really know why, but my classmates really like putting their head under the bowl shaped pieces, even knowing that it's a 50-pound piece that's hanging above their head. But I don't know what's up with that, but they told me that they feel safe around it, so I'll go with it. But going back to what I was saying in the first slide, I think it's really beautiful when people find a specific place that they feel belonged in within the sculpture. And like some people were talking in the sculpture or putting their head there. And then the picture on the very right is Eric. He's my professor, and he looks really happy there because he's probably thinking that I won't be asking for an extra burnout anymore. But yes. And around the same time, I also learned how to do floor loom weavings. Um, I experimented with dyeing my own yarn, which is the one on the very right. And then I experimented with using plastic tubings and chenille weavings. I didn't include the plastic tubings all the way through the weaving, but I started experimenting with different texture and stuff. And then the one on the very left is a piece that I did for a double weave. And a double weave means that you're weaving two fabrics at the same time, but you can also put stuffings in between it. So that's how I got the different textures. And I really enjoy the process of weaving, but after I lost access to the floor looms, I started thinking about what I can do with it outside of class. So I started doing a project of weaving in bronze. So this is also a piece that was in the exhibition for the scholarship. And I hand wove every individual piece of yarn that was dipped in wax. And my studio looked like a weaving factory for a good semester, but I didn't seal any of the surfaces. So over time, it will get natural patina from people touching it. And since it's also a very process intense piece, I really like seeing how other people's fingerprints started showing up on my piece. And it's like a commitment between like both the audience and also like my own work. And people were asking me about the process, so I decided to include this slide as well. The one on the very left is a picture of the wax or like the yarn that was dipped in wax. And then every week I would be hand weaving all of these. And then the one on the bottom is the sprue system that I had. So usually I put one big sprue in the middle and then one weavings on each side. And most of them, I don't think there were too many miscasts. Most of them casted pretty nicely. And then on the picture on the top, it is the sprue system got a little bit crazy because my professor started like setting a limit on how many things you can burn out per class. So I just decided to add 8 weavings on one, and then it worked perfectly. I finished my project. Yeah. And then this is a picture that I took at the closing reception. So I displayed this work also in April, and I displayed it for a good 3 or 4 months. And then I actually found out that the fingerprints that people were touching throughout the summer started to show up right now. So this picture, all the coloration that you see are actually all fingerprints. And if you look really closely, you can see the exact fingerprints, which I think is really like surprising to me how detailed it can get. And yeah. Now I'm showing some pieces that I've been working on more recently. This is a iron casted piece that was MDF boards that was layered on an open face sand mold and then wrapped in burlap. And then instead of just pouring it once perfectly, I started moving it around projects that are being poured or like molds that are being poured so that it could get layers of splashes. And this is how it got all the rough edges on the side and also the different textures. And I experimented with like patina and like the time aspect of castings. So I wrapped this project up in cardboard and paper after a rain, and then I just never looked at it until the day of my solo exhibition install, which was like less than a week ago. And this was what it looked like, and I think I really like it. Yes. And I've also been working with some screen printing. This is a picture that I took when I was working in a Japanese foundry where they did Tatara. And they've been doing Tatara for like more than 450 years. So they were one of the few families that started Tatara a long time ago. And I think it's a really beautiful thing that everyone was there for like more than 20 something hours without a break just to create this beautiful fire. So I started experimenting with layering like different prints and using CNYK, but just printing one layer at each time, but layering the paint on top of the screen before I paint instead of layering the prints that I have. Yes. And this is also a pretty recent project. This was from critique last week. But this is machine knitted, and I started experimenting with like increase decrease on a machine knitting or on a knitting machine. And I experiment with more pleats and holes, and I'm planning on using this technique to create more installation work. And this is the thing that I was working on 2 days before I left to Alabama. But I think this is really fun. It's steel sheets that I use a rosebud torch to pry the edges open. And this way I could create like a more fabric or like softer texture through the use of a torch. And for this one, I am planning on eventually making it into a wearable sculpture where I will CNC cut out like houndstooth patterns on a steel sheet, but like pry it open and then like create the fabric-like texture, and eventually having people to interact with it. But yes, this is my presentation. Thank you so much. Oh, before I head out, can I take a selfie? Is it possible? Can I take a selfie? Thank you. Okay, thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Christina Bridges Glover. Before I start, I just wanted to give a brief trigger warning for sexual assault and suicide before I continue. But hi, I am from the DFW area from the University of North Texas. Um, I am super excited to be here. I work with a lot of different mediums, but specifically, most of the time, acrylic that is laser cut. I live in Fort Worth, and as of like 2 weeks ago, I just moved into my very first own studio. Yay. So I'm super excited about it. It is Art Tooth Studio in Fort Worth. It's a little community of about 5 of us, and they do a lot of activations of different gallery installs around the city as well. So I'm excited to collaborate with them going forward also. I am in my second semester of my junior year right now. I will start my senior year next semester, and I'm slated to graduate in the fall of 2025. I love UNT. Being back at school is one of the best things that has ever happened to me. And then, yeah, this is also a photo of me and my husband. He is my favorite person ever and is the main reason why I'm even able to be back at school. So big thanks for him. I would not be here. In the meantime, before I came back to school, preface, I was a student back in 2014 to 2015 at UNT, but I had to drop out. We'll get to that. But in the meantime, after I dropped out, I was a makeup artist. So I worked all over DFW. I worked in retail. I worked freelance for a long time. I did everything from like quinceañeras to weddings to I actually got to work with opera companies in like Dallas and Fort Worth. I'll never forget that because it was like a big change in my career as a makeup artist from like getting paid like, oh yeah, I'll pay you $60 to come do my makeup for the prom to like, oh, now I have a comma in my paycheck. And so that was like a big deal for me. Yeah, but I ultimately left the profession because something with makeup artistry is that you are booked every weekend. So you miss every holiday and you never get to do really a lot of things in life. And I missed art and I felt like life was taken away from me. And so I made a big decision to come back to UNT. When I was at UNT prior in 2014 to 2015, my major was actually comm design. I was in the comm design program at UNT. Graphic design is still like a huge part of my life. I feel like even as a sculptor, I like almost approach every single part of like my projects with like a graphic design head, if that makes sense. So this is just some of the stuff that I have done graphic design wise. When I came back to UNT, I got a job at UNT as the graphic designer for the Pride Alliance, which was like a LGBT facing office at UNT. And unfortunately did get closed down because of SB 17. And I did lose my job because of it. This is just some of my work during that time. When I think about inspiration of my work, going forward into sculpture, some of the things that inspire me the most are anything that's going to hint at like a theme of resiliency. So a little bit about me and my story. I kind of talked about it that I had to drop out. In 2015, I unfortunately was a victim of sexual assault and stalking, and I was diagnosed with PTSD and had to drop out of school. It was really bad. I had, unfortunately had multiple suicide attempts and spent a few years in and out of hospitals. It took a lot for me to get to where I am today. I feel like if you could ask any of my family members, every time they talk to me, they would think that it was the last time they were ever going to talk to me. And now I'm here. And so every single thing that I make is like a win to me. And so I have explored other things in my art, but that is like where I am now and where I'm going to make art in the future. That's really the only thing I really want to talk about. So when it talks about being resilient, right? I use that word a lot in a lot of my work, a lot of my titles. One of the things that I use as a symbol for that is a lily flower. My grandparents have lilies in their backyard. They've grown them like they're like forever. They're huge, like all different kinds of lilies. There's hundreds of lilies. Some are even older than me. And if you look up the life expectancy of a lily flower, it's like 13 years. But there's still some lily plants there that are older than me, and I'm like almost 30. And every year they come back. Every single year they bloom, but throughout the year, you don't really see what they're going through. They're underground, fighting a fight. Like in Texas, we have crazy weather. We have like freezes, sometimes below zero, sometimes it's 117 degrees. And so all year they're fighting. Like there's tons of things that are happening to make them, die. And then every year it's like, oh, are they going to come back? And then they do. And I think that that's really beautiful. And so I use that as a symbol in my work. Another thing that I think that I was really inspired by is I have this lace right here. And lace, just when you look at it, obviously it's beautiful and fragile. But I had the privilege of going to the Venice Biennale over the summer. It was life-changing, amazing. But when I was in Venice, we got to go to a museum in Brabham where some of the very first laces were. And then this lace right here was from the 17th century. I did scan it like through the glass. I think there's like a quote that's like, great artists steal outright, which is kind of like where I'm going. But it was so interesting to me to see lace that's hundreds of years old, that's fragile, that has a lot of effort to it, that has value, and to think about it in reference to my own life and my own struggles and like where I am and where I'm going in the future. So that's the main things that I use and reference in my work. You're going to see them as we go through my portfolio. So we'll call back to them. Another thing is mirrors. Mirrors, I feel like is kind of like an obvious of like a reflection to the past, but also the inner self. So those are the main things that I think about in my work. When I came back to UNT in 2022, this is one of the first pieces that I made in my very first semester back in college. So this is one of my foundational works. But I actually had it in one of my solo shows recently. I have it in here because this was the very first piece I ever made with a laser cutter. And me and the laser cutter are best friends. I use a laser cutter in almost all of my work. This piece specifically, what I did is I was really interested in like lost memories and like not knowing like the full story behind things. And I found photographs from albums in thrift shops that were like abandoned like all throughout DFW of just like random photographs and albums. And I scanned the images and I essentially made a pattern with all of the different faces that I found, laser engraved them into this fabric, and then essentially sewed this bear. And that was kind of my first experience with the laser, and we've been together ever since. This is another piece. I included this because I was part of my application. It's been on the MSA website. So in case you saw it and wanted to know anything behind it. This is the very first piece I ever did that was laser cut acrylic, which I also use in my work a lot. I was really interested in surveillance. I was like a special interest that I had for a little bit, where I was like reading a ton of court documents and books about just how deep surveillance went. And so I made this piece in reference to that. I haven't really focused on that in my work since, but this piece specifically was like kind of the beginning of a chapter of laser cut and engraved acrylic. This piece is wood and also laser cut and engraved, not laser engraved glass, with also paper in the middle. When I was talking earlier about how I was in and out of like mental institutions for a few years, I kept extensive journals. I just wrote and wrote and wrote every single day. And I wanted to make a piece to kind of like represent that journey and that specific time. So the actual glass on here is laser engraved of the like scanned pages that were in that journal. And then the actual center is like a ripped out page that I have folded up. This piece is also in the exhibition, if you had the privilege to go see it. This piece also is a little bit different in subject material. This is specifically about my experience as being a non-binary person and kind of asking in a nice way to please be respected. I think that a lot of the times being queer or being non-binary is something that people don't really associate with me because I'm very feminine, and I don't think that they necessarily have to be together. So this is like my kind of piece in ode to that. And then, so this piece was also in the exhibition. This is to all the time I've wasted. Something that I struggle with a lot, like still today, like I'll make art about it, but I still internally struggle with it, is where I'm at in my life compared to other people that are also my age. And so, but even though like I know that, you know, obviously I'm not in my early 20s, but I am doing like the right thing. But I've faced with a lot of judgment a lot. And so this is a piece and kind of ode to that, to all the time I've wasted essentially to get to where I am today. This is kind of a beginning of the chapter. This piece was in the scholarship exhibition, but she does look a lot prettier in the complete dark. A lot of my pieces moving forward, I use completely like no overhead lighting at all. This piece has the lilies that we kind of talked about before. These are actual like photographs from the lilies in my grandparents' backyard. and I made a house, and I had this idea, if I laser engraved the mirror upside down and lasered the mirror away, if it would like project the image on the wall and the reflection. And so I tried a little small piece, and I remember I like shined a flashlight on it like under the table in the dark, and I saw that it worked, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing. It's kind of a thing that I've used since, and I continue to want to use in my work moving forward. This piece, this piece, please, I want changes from recently. This is a wooden window frame that I made that has curtains. As before, when the other please piece that we looked at, I've used the word please in my work in a few different pieces that I have. This piece specifically, in the different panels that are on the window, there's different imagery, and they're all laser engraved into mirrors. So the reflection that you see is what I have lasered. There's lace, this lace that I scanned from the museum, and different photographs of lilies, but I also in this as well have photographs of like different places that I would see in the different places that I was talking about, such as the hospitals, like the actual view out the window. So I have a few of those collaged in here. Essentially, what I'm thinking of this is like a longing for something different, longing for change, but then also a reflection on the past. This is one of my most recent pieces, like within the last month. This is a Scandinavian pine cone lamp that I found. There's one that's sold through IKEA that I essentially stole the pattern of, and changed the materials to be lasered acrylic specifically. But on here, I have some of the exact same imagery that we had talked about before. Lilies, specifically ones from my grandparents' backyard. I also have the same lace images, and I have also photos from like inside of places that I've lived, and I also have barbed wire on there as well. But as this spins, the reflections are cast on the wall. It's roughly about 20 inches by 24 inches. And yeah, that's one of my most recent pieces. Over the past year, and 2024 has been an extremely busy year for me as an artist. I have completed, I will end 2024 with 14 different exhibitions added to my CV. There have been multiple times over the past year where I've had like 3 different exhibitions in one weekend, which is a good problem to have, but it does mean that a lot of the times I'm running around like crazy. But I also had my very first solo show this year, which I was super excited about. I've been in galleries mostly around Texas, such as like 500X Gallery, Arts Fort Worth, the Eclectica, and I have upcoming exhibitions planned in places like the New Media Contemporary, and also Fort Works Art in Fort Worth. So I'm super excited. And also the galleries at school, like the Cora Stafford Gallery and the Paul Vortman Gallery. So I'm super excited about 2025. It already looks to be like a busy year for me, and I'm excited to book more exhibitions and travel more places. And yeah, that's all I have. We're saving questions for the end, but I would love if you would stay in contact with me or send me anything that you have. I have my Instagram up here on my website. But yeah, thank you so much. My name is Lisa Brunet. And I have but they won't stay out too long. The year before my accident, a neighbor pushed our landlord to install a handicap. I perceived her as healthy and silently wondered why she insisted on this accommodation. I judged her. In the split second it took pedestrian hit land to shatter the right side of my skeleton, partially disabled my body, triggering a constellation of peripheral health conditions. The way I experienced every part of life changed. Now trapped in a reality where I must fight daily for basic function, I became acutely aware of slope, of lips on nearly every door, of obstacles, of the width, of backgrounds, of students' body language. Body language and speech patterns on days I used a wheelchair as opposed to days I towered over them in a walker. I became aware of the way I appear to onlookers as I switched between assisted devices and walking without. And believe me, onlooker opinions do become a disabled person's problem. I learned to recognize predatory behavior. I became viscerally daily aware of Maslow's hierarchy of the cost each task and stressor had on pain tolerance reserves. Everything is a trade-off. The feats of staggering normalcy today to handle an inaccessible room, but I might pay by sacrificing tomorrow's ability to function. I began to budget activities differently, understand safety and isolation differently. I became an exhausted but relentless strategic fighter. I learned to do battle with our for-profit healthcare system. 7 months after that life-altering moment, I began building work with an understanding of traumatic injury, aftermath, recovery, and life with disability. But that's not where sculpture started for me. I took my first metal sculpture 24 years ago. I'm actually 44, learning forged foundry and fabrication at Diablo Valley College in the San Francisco Bay Area. We learned complex mold making, using both rigid material and rigid original models, which forced us to make perfect mold divisions. We managed to snag Hopi Breton from the Crucible. She organized our metal arts club to build a cupola for its cloth. I was smitten with wax sculpting, mold making, and metal pours. Art school wasn't possible financially for me, so I moved to New York to be a wham while I figured out a plan. Modeling is an interesting relationship with art. As model, you are not the subject, the clothing is. You're part pedestal, part art medium, and part collaborator with the photographer and team. It's a performance. Arts, let's see, taking classes at the Art Students League with Oscar Garcia, Greg Wyatt, and Dana Parlier taught me more about wax sculpting, mold making, and bronze choosing. I'm sorry, I'm reading. This way I don't talk for an hour, because I will otherwise. We poured upstate at Bitler. Dana Parlier forced us to chase manually. No power tools, just chisels, saws, and files. I built more character than I ever wanted. More than technical skills, the work I saw in New York changed the way I view art. It reshaped my goals. I watched strangers hug Charles Long's interactive pet sounds blobs. I saw commuters who avoid eye contact make music together on Chris Janney's Reach New York, an urban musical instrument. Not to mention Louise Bourgeois' Cells and Alexander McQueen's breathtaking Savage Beauty retrospective. I became a member at the Met Museum so I could skip the line and see his exhibit 5 more times. After 4.5 years as a receptionist at a Fifth Avenue ad agency, I moved to Texas to study art direction and graphic design at the University of North Texas. I chose it both for the award-winning comm design program and for its foundry. Here's one favorite project. I branded and designed packaging using the stage name of a Victorian circus strongwoman, Minerva. After completing a design degree and taking a desk job, I turned Minerva's curious physics into a fun side business. Folks often called me Minerva in business emails. Who could object to that? It's gradually becoming my artist name. Back to sculpture. 7 months after that life-altering pedestrian hit and run, I began sculpting again. Art is a powerful and effective way to help viewers see a different reality. Fetal position came out of 3 thoughts: the silent scream of PTSD, the process of being formed and developed by brutal experiences, and Psyche sleeping, wholly exhausted by her impossible ordeals.
I torched and sandblasted her simplified form to highlight the wood grain, and then sealed her with wax. As destructive as this accident was, the response of every human I'd ever met and a few I hadn't overwhelmed me. They visited so often that my nursing home called my room the party room. They raised money for hospital bills, drove and picked up, shopped and carried, unpacked and moved, and responded with floods of support on social media. That love created extraordinary beauty and a shattering experience. For Bone Orchid, I created and froze wax bones to make them brittle, then hit them with a hammer in the spots mine broke and cast them in bronze. I arranged the pieces into a type of orchid given to me in the hospital. For the record, the helpful, flexible shop techs and professors were the reason I could make this sculpture while my bones were still shattered. If I had to choose between accommodating professors and staff or an accessible building, I'd choose the professors every time. Your accommodations will help make the impossible possible. So the Bone Garden series takes any bone, ligament, or soft tissue that I broke, flexed, or affected in hit and run, and it uses them to build plants. I interpret my rules loosely. I broke only vertebrae L2 through L5, but I built an entire spine by hand around a steel core, shaping each wax vertebra individually with tendon-covered roots sprouting from the base. I think spending forever on details is my happy place. Life with disability attracts all kinds of predators looking for convenient targets. As a woman, I've been accused of being too nice in 3 different parts of the country. As a suddenly disabled adult student alone in a new state, I was forced to learn to say no, to fight, to protect myself. And here are 2 more bone garden pieces. One resin, and this one is bronze and stainless steel. In his children's classic, The Magician's Nephew, fantasy author C.S. Lewis borrows an idea from William Morris to create the wood between the worlds, a way place carpeted with portal pools to other worlds. Not merely a travel hub, this mossy wood actively brings relief. Verdant and inherently alive, the mossy grass and dense trees can almost be heard growing, sunlight and calm breeze moving quietly through their leaves. Visitors feel intense relief as all memories fade like a half-forgotten dream. Trauma and weariness evaporate for most who end up in the wood, while predatory visitors feel themselves drained of power to do harm. I built this surgical instrument table while anticipating my mother's death from an incurable type of cancer. After her death, I revisited and replaced elements of the table and added choreography. Hemostats clamping spools of thread in a loose weave around a mossy pool. The M&M candies my father used to lure her up mountains while backpacking when they were young. A bottle of tears collected for months while grieving, now dried. An upper pool in an omega-shaped frame. Amber, casting golden light on the seed pod steps climbing the wall. 5 gold tumors, a spool of golden thread, cut. This sound cocoon and the light cocoon that comes next start to explore ways to make sculptures that people can climb into, that create soothing or healing experiences, something that we need more than ever this week. Let's get that time. With the light helmet, socializing took no effort in the hospital and nursing home. Once I left, though, caring for myself and finding ways to see other humans turned into an exhausting, constant challenge. Get to work, solve one problem, then the next. I budgeted pain tolerance to bake more bread, cookies, and muffins in my first 8 months after leaving the nursing home than in my previous healthy decade combined. Over the years, I installed a used projector in my home and built a place to hang speakers. Baked pizzas for movie night by a cushioned wheelchair in my kitchen. I became a deep-sea anglerfish, luring what I need to my home by the light of a theater, the smell of baking bread, the music of a Bollywood soundtrack. For this piece, I solved problems with primarily what I had on hand, using recycled and scrap materials to create the light helmet, ribs, and stridulation board, and attach them to my braces and gait belt from physical therapy. This Colifrin Giordani light helmet illuminates my immediate surroundings, drawing all eyes in a dark room to its curling fiber optic whiskers, in glowing lights, just like the bioluminescent anglerfish. I dance with a combination of movements that restored strength and coordination in my hands, my arm, my leg, my knee. The Lewa hula step, wrist flexions and extensions, full arm and leg extensions and clothespin transfers from a surface on my gait belt to a rib on my shoulder brace. Sounds are created by stridulation. Another way Kingdom Animalia attracts what it needs. I drag clothespins across a jagged surface on my wrist brace, and bells on the clothespins make noise when my hips and shoulders move. A soundtrack plays over this, an eerie hula beat that I mixed together from NOAA hydrophone recordings of deep sea ice quakes and air. There is so much more, but I'll gradually post these on social media. And I'll save questions for the end.
All right, I brought water with me because I learned the hard way this morning that my mouth gets very dry when I'm talking. I'm Adah Bennion. I'm currently in my second year of my MSA at the University of Georgia in Athens, where I'm a research assistant at the Lamar Dodd School of Art. So I am going to break my work, or at least my presentation today, up into two parts. The first will focus a lot more on where I'm coming from and what forms my work, and the second half will be some of the directions I'm moving into. And I too am going to read because I am a rambler when let loose. A plastic grocery bag caught on the tines of a wire fence, an oil painting of my sister, a partially crushed aluminum can beneath the metro third rail, and my grandmother's last set of sheets. These are my artifacts, heirlooms, the shed snakeskins of memory. Born in rural Utah, I was raised under the persistent spirit of homesteading Mormon ancestors on romanticized stories of individualism and frugality, the virtues of a people who scrimped, squirreled, and hoarded for the benefit of some next assumed generation of kin. I came of age during a time when Bush-era social anxieties ushered waves of doomsday preppers to my native desert in search of some more anachronistic way of life. Mirroring my development, my work comes from a place both of homegrown country girl optimism with a mend and make do attitude, and a dark fascination with the prospect of foraging in a dystopic future, imagining the resource-driven aesthetics and cultural desires of an apocalyptic tomorrow. My practice engages processes of traditional craft and fiber to form intimate and explorative relationships with materials over protracted lengths of time, with dedicated time and intention, through which I explore interweaving threads of time, materiality, memory, and value as they intersect with and within our contemporary context. Compelled by the resourcefulness that comes from limitation, I work almost exclusively with non-new materials, the discarded, jettisoned, and forgotten items with which our landscape is bursting at the seams. Referencing the wartime and Depression-era practices of making clothes and quilts from empty flour sacks, this piece, Returning Star, is a handmade quilt top featuring the traditional 8-point Star of Bethlehem pattern, commonly known as Star of Bethlehem or Morning Star. And it is made entirely from used plastic thank you grocery bags. Titled after the text, "Please return to a participating store for recycling," that is commonly printed on these bags. And then a little bit less straightforward is the collection Prepackaged Couture, High Fashion, Great Value, which combines this practice of making do with whatever is on hand and the decadent attire and sheer opulence worn by celebrities at the Met Gala. Made entirely from repurposed plastic shopping bags and single-use product packaging, this collection explores the lifespan and reusability of material waste generated on a daily basis by a consumer society. Oh, this cannot go there. Obsessed with, oh, let's see, did I get ahead of myself? I did, okay. Sorry. Material waste generated on a daily basis by a consumer society obsessed with the luxuriousness of immediacy and the convenience of cheap, disposable products and being seen. Like my foremothers, I gather my materials, which are refuse and abandoned objects, from the community and environs around me. I then dismantle these by hand, slowly becoming acquainted with the tendencies, preferences, and characteristics of each. Though I demarcate my material parameters by using terms like non-new and trash, I do this only due to the shortcomings of language, as it is my aim to strip away the qualifiers and categories we routinely, time for a sip of water, sorry. Qualifiers and categories we routinely, promise I can read, routinely use to assign meaning and value to matter, thereby allowing materials to exist and present themselves in terms of their properties and capacities. Oh, and I think that's supposed to hit play. Sorry, guys. Working with a sense of media fluidity in my practice, my work leans into blurring the lines between craft and contemporary art, seeking to corrupt the load-bearing columns that uphold our inherited hierarchies of value by subverting standardized notions of categorization, qualification, and deserving. I manually engage refuse with intention as a practice of preservation and dissonance, carrying on the bodily traditions and rituals of craft in defiance of a culture obsessed with immediacy, convenience, and scrolling. From delicate plastic forms of hand-sewn garments, decorative lace adornments, and their cast metal doppelgangers, to immersive installations and both live and mediated performances, my practice calls for the pursuit of traditional and experimental forms of investigation alike, ranging from library to landfill, laboratory to crucible, and lecture hall to estate sale, pulling at the threads that connect objects and memory, as I seek the residual inheritances and material wake of a culture no longer interested in the slow and subtle narratives of matter. Through this found and co-opted nostalgia, I explore ideas of object memory, aura, and sentimentality, our entangled relationships with objects as embodied vessels for meaning, memory, and identity, as we conceptualize mortality and our underlying fears of being forgotten. I am interested in the materiality of inheritance, heritage, and lineage, all that we pass on, all that is left behind, and all that remains. Grappling with these in my work, I confront my multi-generational impulse to preserve and save, to hoard, and slowly come to terms with being the end of my family line. Now we're to part 2. I find myself compelled by the prospective evolutional arcs of made materials in geologic time, the push and pull, the fluid seam lines that run between and through the making and the made, where things converge. The tree slowly absorbing the chain link fence, its roots buckling the sidewalk underfoot, the remnants of an old t-shirt and strands of my hair tucked neatly into a bird's nest, a well-loved chore coat infused with the cellular traces of the body it once held, the microplastics coursing through my veins. The work that emerges from these thoughts is the speculative spawn of adaptive material relationships and the chimeric ecologies of a post-anthropocentric world, which manifest as bizarre yet appealing juxtapositions of material and form, suggestive of a naturally occurring convergence of traditional craft processes and synthetic materials over time. These ideas find material expression as both distinctly formal made objects, such as in a small, bright red and orange needle lace portrait of a melting popsicle made from plastic threads of a knitted mesh produce sack, and as more porous compositions, such as the carefully curated, shrine-like arrangements of found matter and minimally altered objects, dappling the walls and open plains of my studio, each placed with care like guests around a dinner table, whose temporarily ephemeral presence is for my sake alone. Working in this environment, I lean into the practice of conducting material and process studies as I seek the subtle silent exchanges taking place amongst amassed and arranged matter that surrounds me. Conversations dancing at the periphery of my awareness as my hands take up the steady rhythm of weft and shuttle, passing up and over, back and forth, slowly lulling my conscious mind to slip into the undercurrent of the body's incantational repeating motions. Under, over, turn and repeat. I imagine that after centuries of being animated by and so tightly bound to the movements and desires of human bodies, that processes of fiber and craft might carry on vestigially like a phantom limb, continuing to trace along the contours of its ritualized motions, long after even the memory of the bodies that had performed them has faded. Newly animated and free, I imagine craft traditions and their rapidly evolving descendants seeping into their environs, slowly permeating a landscape ripe with derelict excess and prolific detritus. An algal bloom of looping strands of translucent pearly twined plastic slowly knits its way across, moss-like, around the base of an oak tree whose roots have ruptured the neighboring plains of concrete, recreating in miniature the fault block mountains of the Sierra Nevadas. The bulbous and engorged crown of a metallic fungi emerges from the silt-encrusted landscape that once was Lake Powell. The exoskeletal lattices of scaffolding threading themselves lace-like around and across the basins and ranges where the ant-like metropolises of man once churned. On this timeline, I imagine the unmaking and remaking of the landscape, its evolutional adornment, the emergence of craft slowly becoming feral. Something of this possibility can be found in the piece Pelt, Always Such a Pleasant Girl, in which a dress has been carefully sewn out of translucent plastic and run through with hundreds of pine needles, as well as in the piece Anniversary Edition, Palliative Care in January, which is a found snack food wrapper in which a found snack food wrapper is slowly encrusted as thousands of tiny glittering beads seemingly emerge and spread mold-like across its surface. In each of these works, my intervention appears only as a subtle joining of two materials through a simple repeating process: pierce, thread, push, repeat, pierce, thread, loop, pull, repeat, thereby allowing the language of materials to establish the dialogue, my body serving only as the actant for their union. As if, given time, they might have reached this state on their own. Through my recent reading, I am developing an understanding of and relationship to concepts of entangled connectivity, material vibrancy, and the potentiality of multi-species kin-making and speculative futurities of petrotime, from the likes of Jane Bennett, Heather Davis, Amy Elkins, and Donna Haraway. From these thinkers, I'm slowly learning to interpret and articulate the vibrations made by the churning undertow in my work, the insistent through lines that continue to drag me back time and time again, connecting me to the intricate webs of temporalities, beings and bodies of matter, peripheral bodies, full of yearning, ever just out of reach. Working to reconcile the devastating enormity of the tangled snarl of material implications we have built our nest in, and the body's temporal understanding of death, I perform repeating motions with my hands, slowly articulating abstracted vessels of desire and the lonesome forms of longing. Memory, time, and mutation, plasticity and longing, entanglement and alchemic reciprocity. These are the ideas haunting my studio of late, circling round as I seek to gather up the loose-ended tendrils of my declining family tree, and to slowly, carefully begin to weave them through and between a far-reaching warp of vibrant bodies and of matter, the unexpected kin and plastic progeny connecting past, present, and potential futurities, held together with a single looping knotted plastic thread.
Hi, everyone. I'm honored to be here today presenting with all of these amazing artists to share a little bit with you all about my work. So I'm going to talk about some inspiration, some influences, and the most recent body of work that I created. So my name is Rylee Brabham. I'm currently a BFA student at Mississippi State University. And I'm an installation artist. I work primarily with found objects in conjunction with fabricated ones. So I'm interested in objects. I'm interested in what they mean subjectively. I'm interested in what they mean objectively, in the meaning that we assign to them and how that meaning can change, how it can be altered or articulated through, that object's specific context. So Adam Milner is one of my biggest inspirations, and he first got me thinking about objects and their situations and how, objects can be contained and, containers can contain those things. And so this piece was a response to Adam Milner's work, and this piece is called You Will Leave, But I Will Keep You With Me. And it's all of the objects that are in this cabinet are things that were given to me by people that were, once a part of my life that came and left. And so I think about objects as connection points. They are things that we use to connect with people and places, things that we no longer have access to. So yeah, there's an Adam Milner quote that I like to show whenever I show this piece. It says, it's voyeuristic in a way to hold on to objects. It's a way of connecting to people when we can't connect to them physically. And so this piece is also where I started thinking about furniture, about the furniture object, its traditions, their purpose, and how those purposes and traditions can be subverted or explored further. So for instance, a cabinet can contain, it can display. So yeah, I'm super interested in that duality of purpose. So this is another piece where I started to think about that functionality. What does it mean to render a functional object non-functional, to turn it on its head, quite literally? And it's also where I started thinking about gender, the domestic space, my relationship to gender, and my relationship to my family upbringing. And so along those lines, this piece is sort of a culmination of that feeling. So this piece is called You're a Stranger, You Always Have Been. It's about growing up queer in a family that doesn't accept that, and not only that, but makes every effort to suppress it, to not acknowledge it. And so this is also where I started thinking about cicadas as a personal motif for my transness. So I'm not the first guy to do that, but this is where it happened for me. So all of these pieces were really pivotal to leading me down this road of thinking about making and material, and specifically how we attach gender to both of those things. So this piece is called Belongings. And it's where I think I started thinking about heirlooms in that specific context. So there's a tension for me that's present in all of these objects. All these objects are things that were given to me or have sort of descended through the women in my family, given to me by my mother, my grandmother, given to them by other women before. And so this piece is really where I started to interrogate how material can be gendered. What does it mean to inscribe metal, typically a material that's, got a masculine connotation with a delicate pattern of lace that was crocheted by my great-great-grandmother? What does it mean for me to situate these objects in cages? Things that have passed through the hands of the women in my family, and how do those objects change their meaning just by being in my possession? So yeah, and also there are larger implications of labor that I began to think about with this work, and also thinking about the domestic space as sort of repositories for binary gender performance. And from there, this piece sort of resulted. It came about kind of last minute as I was installing my solo show. I had all of these things that I had been working on throughout the semester, all of these pieces that I'd been putting together. This is an apron that was, all of these quilt pieces were hand stitched by my great-great-grandmother. And I cut them up and made this really egregiously feminine apron with them. I had a recipe book that I sort of dug through, found a recipe for fruitcake, a little on the nose. And then this is another sort of written document. It's kind of hard to see, but it's a little prayer written in that frame. And so all of these things, oh, and then the cast aluminum egg. So all these things were pieces that I had sort of been putting together over the course of the semester, and they came about last minute in an installation. But I'm thinking about how all of these different processes, the processes of cast metal, welding, sewing, all of these things sort of coming together and interacting, and the implications that they create through installation. So there's, the apron and then the frying pan and the tiled floor. Those conjure up an image of domestic labor in my mind. And there's a dire humor in the installation with the cicadas sort of crawling up the wall as well. So these things are, I'm interested in these objects and how they're connected to one another, but also how they're complicated by my relationship to them. So they're overt references to my family members, but there's also so much meaning that's imbued in them through my interacting with them, through my, embroidering a snarky Bible verse onto them as a trans person. So yeah, I'm really trying to break down these various processes of making and thinking, exploring the binary constructs that sort of define them through my relationship to them and through using my body to perform them. Yeah, trying to understand how these systems of gender originated, their implications, and sort of redefining that through my role in making. So this piece is called Inheritance, and it's not a great photo, but this table is about 8 feet long, and so there's these rails that sort of run around the perimeter of the table, sort of implying that one could not take a seat at the table and slide their legs underneath. And there's one chair that sits at the head of the table, and this piece is, the installation as a whole is meant to articulate my experience in the domestic sphere as an othering experience. Like there's so much expectation, yeah, that I feel like I have had to grapple with. And so I think a lot of that tension is sort of what I'm thinking about in this installation. And so embroidered on that chair is a quote from River Halen, a trans author that I really enjoy their work. But it says, "The ancient question, do I keep my inheritance or let myself be seen?" So I think that's the question that this whole installation, I think I was asking. I'm really interested in the embroidery sampler, like as a historical reference point. Like they're often really overtly religious and sort of referencing parental and religious authority in a way that I find really funny and weird. So this was sort of my play on that, and there's you know, more to this piece, but this is a sort of close-up shot. But yeah, I'm really thinking about the material, the heirlooms, how these objects are charged, and how they're sort of points of tension for me. What does it mean for me to have this material and use it in a way that celebrates my identity, my body, my presence, rather than upholds like the harmful ideology of like the family members that sort of gave them to me, like that question of an inheritance. Like, I have all these things and I would rather do something better with them, like do something new with them. So yeah, those are all things that sort of went into making this body of work. And so I guess this is a the same You Were a Stranger piece, but a different installation shot of it. Sort of cool to see how that original piece led to all of the rest of the works in the show. And yeah, so I think that's all I've got for you guys, but yeah, thanks.
Hi, I'm Rachel O'Donnell. I'm a senior at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. I'm a BFA. Have an interest in mixed media. I've kind of been incorporating a lot of found object sculpture with objects that I craft. And I've been pretty consistent in my conceptual ideas, drawing inspiration from my experiences as a woman, as well as the experiences of the women in my family, my friends, and just observations I've made of our society and generations before me as well. This is a series I've been working on called Consume Her, and each food doll, as I've been referring to them as, have their own name that is phrases of catcalling or pet names that are unwelcome. So I have been making these dolls that have the legs of a Barbie doll, and then I've been constructing these desserts for their bodies in an attempt to get across feelings of humiliation that you experience when you are sexualized as a woman and objectified. And, you know, these are objects that are meant to be consumed, and they're also usually very decorative, which is why I've been kind of like blending this process of realistic baking materials or processes, and then also incorporating some like sewing techniques, just kind of connect it to traditional female hobbies. And so I started at the end of last semester, I had 4 of these, and now I have 10. So I'm just continuing them, and 5 of them are on display at the art lab if you want to see some of the other ones that I've come up with. This is Tea Party. It's meant to be, I was really having a lot of fun with making the desserts, and I kind of wanted to see what else I could do with them. And so I kind of set this scene of, you know, a commentary on American ideals like white picket fence, nuclear family, and as well as gender roles and beauty standards. And so I have these mannequin legs coming up from the ground, you know, they're at, you know, a tea party of some sort or some sort of event like that. And they're on top of the high heels are a cake and a teacup, but they're unedible because they're filled with various just hyper feminine objects like Barbie doll accessories or makeup products and things. So it's kind of this idea of like they can't be consumed without these concepts or ideals being like shoved down your throat. And then I wanted to keep going with the desserts, but this was actually inspired by a film short film I made, which I will talk about in the next slide. But I kind of liked this idea of um, a serial killer who becomes a serial killer accidentally through her crimes of passion and repeated betrayal. And she's getting away with it, and she, bakes her male victims and past lovers who wronged her into these desserts. And that was inspired by this film I made. It. I'm sorry I can't show you guys the film, but I have these film stills instead so you can kind of see the aesthetic I was going for with it. But the log line I wrote for this film reads, "A breakup argument where her cheating boyfriend calls her crazy leads the main character to win her boyfriend back only to show him what crazy truly looks like and make him pay." And so throughout this throughout this film, my character uses some sort of witchcraft or like manifestation rituals to which are female hobbies that are not usually very respected. And so she uses these to get him back and then drive him crazy. Everything that happens in the dollhouse happens in real life. So they're kind of like voodoo dolls in a way. And then she actually does end up killing him, which is what kind of inspired this series. So I've been interested in like blending my storytelling from filmmaking with my sculptures, and I kind of want to see where that leads. Like maybe this is like a character I wrote for myself that I can play with these sculptures. And then I've been doing some collage making in my two-dimensional classes as well. So this collage was directly inspired by that film as well. And you can see here the very like tongue-in-cheek satirical tone that I've been trying to bring to this story. So this was one of the more recent pieces I did last week for our critique. And this is called Paint It Red. It is a clothesline made from trellises that is displaying stained underwear, period stained underwear. And the idea behind this one was I wanted to be a celebration of the female body and just, if you were going to wash your underwear and not take the time to take the stains out and you're just going to put them on display for your nosy neighbors to see, and like just the unapologetic pride of the female body. So that is that one. And then I wanted to show some of the work that I did before those sculptures and films and everything that I was doing before those, because I feel like these are maybe not my favorite or the best, but they led me to the work that I've been creating now, and I've always stayed pretty committed to this hyper feminine aesthetic that I've created in the conceptual ideas. So thank you.
All of our scholarship winners, if you please go out, take a seat so that we can have entertain a few question and answers. If you have questions, please bring them forward. Your mic should be on. Yeah, mic's on. For anyone, how do you feel about your exhibitions together? Are you seeing some relationship between other work? Anything that you'd like to comment on there?
I mean, Misa and I noticed a really distinct relationship between her cast woven pieces and my pine needle dress, like both just color palette wise, but it felt like there was a lot of material exchange happening there. And I'm also just from the presentations noticing a lot more metal work than I expected, which is really fantastic to see, especially paired with the textiles.
I saw some like relations with like how our works all sometimes like casted a shadow on the walls and also like on the pedestals or something like that. And I feel like all of our works has a very distinct texture, like both physically and like towards them. And I feel like that's a really nice connection within the room when you step in to look at the exhibition. So first, because I'm kind of working with this sweet and unsweet kind of feeling, because I love Y2K 2012, but also poverty and areas in California. So I guess my question is, how do you draw the line or perhaps blur it between the sweet and unsweet nature of your work? And can you please talk more about the hot dog that you had? Because I'm obsessed with like the ribbon for relish, and I really love hot dogs.
Well, for that piece, can you guys hear me? Okay. For that series specifically, I wanted to incorporate more than just desserts. I think, I'm not sure if it was like just different attitudes toward, like the sweet for me is more like satirical, like this is how you expect me to look or present myself, and then the tone is subverting that, like, yeah, I don't know.
Work that you have and like your like, projection of you, does it seem like when you're doing the work with things and handed down to you by your family, even though there's like the tension and all the issues with that, does it seem like it's a healing process for you to be able to put that in your own way?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that is, I think 100% the place that I'm coming from. Like it's a reclamation of it in a lot of ways for me. And it's like, I think the grappling with the tension of that, holding space for all of that, like is a super important part of the process for me.
I'm curious about you said doing the angular dish at the end. Would you mind sharing a little bit about how it felt to maybe integrate your body into a performance for work? And I'm curious about the direction you want to continue with your future work or not seeing it again.
I think I loved adding performance. I loved being able to work something that's unglamorous, like physical therapy and gait belts, into something that could be beautiful. I think it's also a lot easier not to feel self-conscious when the whole room is dark and all people see are the lights. But yeah, I enjoyed that, and I plan to do more performance, and there's some more performances that I didn't get to. So yeah, thank you.
I have a question for any and all of you. How do you feel, because you're all like just leaving school, right, and going on to the next thing, and how do you feel that your work is going to evolve or perhaps change now that you're kind of moving from one kind of stable environment to something new?
I know I've been thinking about that a lot, especially losing access to a lot of those tools. And there are a lot of projects that I've been saving for when I don't have access to those tools to finish, that don't need those tools. And so I think that's really the main thing. Is I'll be doing more things that don't use the CNC or the plasma cutter.
I feel like I'm thinking about similar things regarding like losing access to like facilities or like boundary and stuff like that.
but rather than thinking about what I'll be losing, I've been using a lot more of the resources that it's on the list. And I think this semester especially, I created a lot of different series of work and I found like different connections within different fields. So I've been working a lot in the fashion department, printing, printmaking department, and also closely with sculpture. And I feel like now that I'm working in all these fields, I have more ideas that I could do even outside of school and meeting more people around campus that I can collaborate with even after I graduate.
Yeah, so for me specifically, when I'm thinking about post-graduation, in my brain, I just kind of consider, like, I'm not gonna take no for an answer, to be really honest with you. Like, I'm just gonna find a way, and I'm just gonna figure it out. And so, because there's a lot of, like, I use a laser cutter a lot with my work. And losing access to the ones that we have at school, I just know that I'm gonna find a way. There's like, I think a place in Dallas that I can use, or if I'm applying to grad schools, like that's definitely gonna be on my checklist of like, do they have these types of things that I'm looking for? So yeah, I feel like I will, just kind of find my way and kind of end up in a place where I can still make what I want to make.
Yeah, I feel really similarly. I think that I'm excited to look into grad schools, maybe some other opportunities to, if I have an idea, I'm gonna find a way to make it, find a way to get that done. So I'm super excited to, look for some more opportunities, seek those out, and see where that sort of leads my process of making.
I thought about this a lot because over the last 2 years, my work has remained very consistent in materials and in concepts and aesthetic. I've thought a lot about what it would look like if I did something completely different. I don't know. I don't think I feel like I could never get tired of the aesthetic that I created, but I think one thing for sure is I will probably always make work about my feelings and experiences as a woman. The aesthetic might change depending on what that feeling or message that I'm trying to communicate is. So.
I had another thing that I wanted to add, and is that community is super important. I feel like in times of like in an area post graduation, like especially something like this, right? Or if I'm wanting to explore a new medium where maybe I don't have a class to kind of walk me through how to do something. I will have connections with different people who, have like their own like masters of their craft that I can link up with and be like, hey, do you want to maybe trade some skills? So I think that community is a really important thing to source of how you're gonna make stuff in the future, at least for me.
As I am only halfway through my MSA program, I'm very much in denial of the fact that it will ever end. So I'm trying to pretend that doesn't happen. I'm actually already fantasizing about the potential of a PhD in art history studio studies. We'll see. I doubt that will happen. But yeah, I'm definitely thinking about different ways to continue to fund a studio practice. Fortunately, not a lot of my processes require a lot of machinery, so I can kind of operate mobily and very frugally, but rent still must be paid. So there are things like that. And also I really have come to, kind of late on in life, come to really love and appreciate the academic institution for research and the capacity for collaboration across disciplines. And yeah, it's a really great resource that I want to stay part of. So there might be some teaching in my future, we'll see.
school informs being an artist for you? Like, obviously, we all can have a practice that is not based in academia, but does going to school like give you validity, or is that something that just give you space and time? Just kind of like what doing a BFA and an MFA provided for you as a working artist?
I mean, for me, definitely the time and space to be able to make slow work. And again, access to the kinds of minds that are going to continue to push me in directions that I might not see otherwise on my own.
I know for me specifically, I think it definitely gave me validity as an artist, but I don't think that, for me, it gave me structure that I can apply to my life post-graduation. Prior to coming back to school, I mean, when I came back to school in 2022, I didn't even know that I wanted to do sculpture. I was just like, I'm gonna do like art ed and be a certified teacher, teach high school art, which I may still do. But that was like not even my plan to do sculpture. And I had no structure for how to do art. I don't think I really made any art really at all between the time I left college and came back to college. And so I think like the prompts or having people show you a different artist, for me at least, of how they take like their life experiences and then turn them into a concept, or like how to think about space or time or memory in different ways, has definitely helped me conceptually as an artist and also technically as an artist. I don't think I would have had outside of school. So I think it was, for me personally, definitely life-changing. I don't think I would have gotten to where I am without going to school.
I feel like that too. I also have made, because of the projects and the deadlines, I've made more work in a year than I ever would have if I wasn't in school. And for that, I'm really grateful of just building up a solid portfolio.
I went to school for like 3 years before, maybe even 4. I don't know. I was in school for a long time before I finally stumbled into sculpture, very luckily. So I feel like sculpture kind of found me. And now I'm doing the school thing, I guess, because I've been there for so long. I guess I'll get a degree, like why not? But yeah, so that's me. But I'm gonna continue going to school because like Rachel said, or I would like to pursue an MFA in the future because, yeah, same. It's like if I kind of need an impetus to do the work. And so, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what I need. I don't know if I have the self-discipline. Well, I'm building it right now. I'm building it right now. That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing.
I think for me, school did give me a general sense of what the art community would look like. But until like sophomore year of college, when Eric brought me to SLOS, I never actually seen the outside world of what art career could look like. And I feel like meeting people at conferences and talking to people around all over the place really got my eyes actually opened from the bubble that I was in. And I feel like now the institution space is giving me a time and like a safe space to create artwork and getting critiques and getting feedbacks on how I can improve myself and how I can push myself to prepare myself for the artist community outside of school. And like going to conferences like this or talking to people outside of school makes me see what the outside world is actually like.
As much as I hate to say it, I think deadlines are a big part of what school provides. And you can't really get crippled by perfectionism if you have to turn it in next week. True, but also, you know, of course, being able to ask experts to solve a problem or like workshop something that I wouldn't know how to do alone. Of course, the resources, you know, the tools. And sometimes I have a love-hate relationship with the prompts. Because there are things that I want to make, but sometimes the prompts also steer us in really interesting directions.
Like, as of this year, I was like, I'm not doing any. Sorry, I didn't say that.
I'm gonna find a way to make the piece that I wanna make.
Yeah.
Regardless of the problem.
Yeah. Sometimes I got you can make it out.
We are unfortunately over time, but thank you all so very much.